Evening, everybody. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Evermore podcast, the Newcastle United podcast, live on the Slide Rule Pass podcast channel. I'm your host, Chris, and I'm joined by not one for sorrow, 2 for joy tonight. You can see we've got the blue tick man, Dan Wales, coming back and making his debut on Evermore is James Lynch. How are you, lads?
I'm
very
fine.
Well, mate. How are you?
You?
Yes, very good. Are you all ready for Santa coming, guys?
Oh, yes. I've written the
All I want is 3 points against Man U, mate. That would make me happy.
Bloody hell, come on, James. I'll get you something from Curry's or something, mate. Bloody hell. I don't own the shop, by the way, for anybody who's watching online. But yes, three points is going to be a hell of an ask, isn't it, for another tumultuous week as a Newcastle fan, sadly, guys. So let's get stuck right into this and burst everybody's Christmas bubble. Obviously, we had a really tough week, didn't we? We conceded, 11 goals, and we scored 1. We played the best 2 teams in the league, arguably the best 2 teams in Europe, obviously in Liverpool and then Manchester City. Really, really tough games, and obviously some very controversial decisions as well. James, just coming to you first, mate, making your debut on Evermore. How did you feel about the games, mate? Were you kind of surprised, or were you just what you expected, or?
Pretty much exactly what I expected. I mean, look, start with the Liverpool game. Dan, I think you called it spot on with 3-1 with your prediction on last week's episode, mate. So well done for that one. But look, it was what you expected, really. We were never going to get anything at Anfield. I mean, the last time we won there in the league was 27 years ago, I believe. So it was always going to be a tall order. They are a brilliant side. There's no getting away from that, and it's no shame to lose to a side like that again will win the league this season. But yeah, I thought we had our moments in the game. Shelby took his goal well, has to be said. Maximin had a couple of half chances, but overall we were beaten fairly convincingly, and Liverpool didn't really get out of first gear. But Man City, much of the same, decent first half. I thought Wilson had a couple of good chances. Joe Linton was exceptional. He seemed to play in like a defensive midfield role at times, in that enforcer role, which we've been lacking for a while. But just too many horrendous mistakes at the back, especially the first goal was just a total comedy of errors. And look, second half we just gave up. We didn't really look up for it, which was disheartening to see. And to be honest, I thought there were some similarities in the Man City performances. The Leicester game a couple of weeks back, and which I thought was our worst performance of the season so far. And I hate to be negative as right now. There is so much to look forward to as a Newcastle fan, but we are in a really precarious position. And if we don't get a result against Man U, potentially we could be 6 points adrift if Watford beat Wolves on Boxing Day, and then you're leaving yourself a mountain to climb.
It's certainly a tough challenge ahead. But we're live on YouTube tonight, guys. Please come along and join us, as Stu has in the comments. Evening, Stu. Nice to see you again, buddy. He was a top man last week. So yeah, this is a safe haven for anybody. If you feel a little bit cautious, like James has just been saying there, if you're a little bit concerned about where the team might be headed, how high the hill is becoming to climb, it's a safe place here. We're not going to dig anybody out. Likewise, if you're positive and you think we've still got a chance, we're not going to dig you out either. But yeah, you're right, James. I mean, I think the one thing that really upset me about that goal in particular, and I had a rant on the Slide Rule Pass channel, it's still up there. Just make sure your kids are out of the room when you watch it. But I couldn't get my head around, and I'll get your opinion on this, Dan, as well in a second, but I couldn't get my head around how Kieran Clark gets back into that side. Yes, I know there was injuries. I think Kraft was touch and go. That's why he was on the bench. Obviously, Fernandez is out. Fabian Schär's on the bench. I can only assume that Schär's potentially going to come back in against Manchester United, which is probably the most winnable fixture out of those 3. Kieran Clark comes in. He makes another howler. And I mean a howler. I've played with pub team players better than that. They've come in at 3 a.m, still stinking a bevy in the changing room, and they don't duck out the way of the ball. Dan, coming to you, who's to blame, Clark or Dubravka? Where did you sit on that one, mate?
No, it's Clark's fault, in my opinion. He should just clear the ball. When you're that close to your own box, and if you don't get a call, which clearly he hasn't had the call, why would you just not put out for a corner, get back together again, reorganize and defend the corner? It is absolutely stupid. It's daft. And obviously, once that goes in 5 minutes in, well, that just sets the tone for the match, unfortunately. As James mentioned, we had our moments in that game. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the penalty shout, because I think enough people have had their say about that and how stupid and ludicrous that decision was. But yeah, in terms of, I think we could look at a lot of clowns in that match, couldn't we? We could look at Kieran Clark. We could look at Martin Atkinson, Craig Pawson, the VAR. Lots of clowns were doing their bit to make that match a comedy of errors.
Yeah, sadly, mate. It's certainly. I wasn't laughing. I don't know about you, lads. I certainly wasn't laughing, I must admit. But yeah, I mean, what about you, James, on that goal? You mentioned it there, mate. Dubravka or Clark's fault? Where are you aiming that at?
Yeah, I think Clark, exactly the same as Dan. I think he's got to clear that. But look, you've got to say Dubravka has got to communicate better in that situation. So, be interesting to see who was in the change room after the game and what was said, because I'd be surprised if words weren't exchanged on that incident. But look, yeah, you've got to blame Clark initially for it. I've seen it back several times, and Stu said that I thought Clark motioned to head it, then let it go. It was the pair of them were just caught between a rock and a hard place, it seemed. But there's just no confidence with the players at the moment. Defensively, as he mentioned, was 11 goals Chris before conceded in the last 3 games. And it's embarrassing, isn't it? It's embarrassing.
It is. I mean, nice to see our friend PK Paul Carter's showing us wash hands. I'm not sure if he means Dubravka's got dirty hands there or not. Maybe that's why he didn't want to touch the ball. Possibly, Paul. Maybe you're right. Maybe he went for a piss before the game and didn't wash him. But yeah, it's. I must admit. I mean, you look at that and you've got to think. We're going to come on to Dubravka a little bit more in a second. But you look at that and you think Clark's not a young player making his debut here. He's an experienced centre half. He's got God knows how many caps for Ireland. As an experienced centre half. Whether if your keeper is unsure and you're not sure whether he's called for, you just head the ball out of play, as Dan rightly says. The only way, not sticking up for Clark, I think he's absolutely gash. If I never see him in a Newcastle shirt again, it'll never be too soon. But, I don't understand why he's ducked unless he's adamant that Dubravka is called for that ball. But then who's shouting that Diaz is there? Where's Lascelles? Where's the the communication in the back four to say no, just fucking get rid of it because the guy's standing on the bloody penalty spot.
Diaz will never score an easier goal in his career.
Oh, mate.
I mean, simple.
Do you know, it was Merry Christmas. Dubravka might as well have wrapped it with a bow and went, there you go, mate. Do you know what I mean? Exactly. Or Clark as well, but it was bloody embarrassing. But yeah, I mean, I think the Liverpool game, just to touch on what you lads said as well, to go back to that, I think we were hard done by in the Liverpool game. We're going to come on to some of those questionable decisions in the next category we're going to talk about. But I think in the Man City game, obviously the first goal was a howler. Come to you there here, James, on this one. The second goal, if these lads never heard of closing anybody down, I mean, I don't know what Willock was doing. He looked like he was one way or the other. He's on his arse, and then I think Match of the Day and Shearer in particular highlighted the gap between Lascelles and Clark, not closing the ball down. What was your view on that one, mate?
Well, again, we've seen that goal how many times this season conceded. We just don't seem to learn from mistakes, defensive errors. And it is a shame because you'd like to think that Eddie Howe is doing all he can on the training ground to get this right. And I just don't think these players are good enough. What's out there right now. And Willock just seems to be an absolute shadow of the player he was last season. I really don't know what's happened to him. I don't know whether or not it's because he's possibly been played out of position, perhaps, or whether or not he prefers being used as an impact. So you could look at the many games, the latter end of last season where he was scoring the goals. He was coming off the bench, but perhaps when players were a bit more tighter. And, again, obviously there were games behind closed doors, and whether or not the pressure's getting to him slightly with the fans in attendance, you don't know. But we were missing Manquillo on Sunday, and I still think he's our best fullback of the club. And Jacob Murphy, for me, very good player, but he's not a right back. And defensively, just wasn't there, was he? And just naive, really, at times. And there's a lot of work to do, and we will come on to talk about transfers and what we're going to do in January. But we need to sign minimum of 4 defenders for me, because otherwise this is going to keep happening.
Absolutely. It's a great comment there from Mark, our fellow slide rule pass man, the stat man himself. He's saying 2 to 3 yards from goal. Dubravka should be making that his. Now, Mark's a goalkeeper, if anyone doesn't remember from watching the show. And Mark would have wiped everybody out. I can testify for that because he wiped me out on several occasions when I was in the way in the box because I was crap in the air. But yeah, he's saying Clark needs to be thrown out in January. They're both to blame for the goal. And I agree with Mark on that. I mean, Clark's getting all the shit. I know I listened to a couple of other podcasts where people saying the fans are booing Clark and they were giving them a bit of stick and all that stuff. And it's never nice when you boo a player, but I think some people need to remember as well that Newcastle United fans, have been through such an emotional roller coaster over the last 2 years, and they've obviously got the takeover now. Excitement's there. Everyone's looking for the new dawn. But when players make these mistakes continuously, James, as you rightly said, continuously over and over and over again, you're going to get sick of these players, aren't you? And people are going to vent their frustration. You can't dig them out too much about that, can you, Dan? What do you think about that, mate?
No, and it's a shame because as these are some of the players who've done as well in the past few years. As much as we're slating Kieran Clark, he's been a fantastic servant to the club in terms of what he's done in the first few years he was at the club. Obviously won the championship and then secured us as a Premier League team in the years after that as well. But that sort of nostalgia and that sort of niceties, that's in the past now, and it's now got to the stage where they're just not good enough. And as PK says, we do need a whole new backline to survive, because let's be honest, they're not good enough.
No, absolutely right.
As you say, they're making the same mistakes week in, week out, and you do wonder like what goes on. As much as you do think that Eddie Howe's training regimes and methods are probably an awful lot better, you just have to wonder sort of what goes on, don't you? I mean, obviously you look at the second goal as well. Both of them just stand still and then try and put a half block in as João Cancelo goes on.
Yeah, Willett was just nowhere to be seen for that one, was he?
Correct. But as he then approaches Lascelles and Clark, they just stand there. He's allowed to take another touch and a half.
Yeah.
Steady himself, compose himself before exactly picking his spot. As I say, anyone can play that well. You give them that much time and space on the ball.
It was reminiscent of Bruno Fernandes's goal against us. Do you remember the Old Trafford game when nobody just went anywhere near him? Just says, "Go on, have a shot." And
which is Mark's just smashed that in the comments as well. You're right, James. It's worrying that they're obviously not learning the lessons from these things. I mean, as you rightly say, James, Eddie Howe can do anything on the training pitch, and he can drill them within an inch of their lives. But when they go on the pitch, they've got to concentrate on the game. And defending like that shows me there's a very lack of concentration within the squad. And moving on to, I suppose, the upcoming game, it's just a really good job. They're not marking one of the best finishers that's ever played the game, really, isn't it, when Cristiano Ronaldo? So how are we feeling about this one, guys? James, come to you first, mate. How do you feel about coming up against Cristiano? It's James, mate.
Well, it's another massive game for us. I mean, I've lost track of how many times I've said that this season now. This is certainly a much more winnable fixture for us compared to the last two. A point would be huge. Something that does worry me, though, about this game is that they will have had two and a bit weeks rest before they play us. And obviously, we all know their last two games were postponed because of COVID. So they will be much fresher than us. I don't think they have too many injuries at the moment. I think only Varane, Pogba and Cavani are still out for them. But look, they've got a huge squad to choose from. Us, on the other hand, we've got a few out, haven't we? Hayden suspended. Shelvey and Manquillo missed the Man City game. Whether or not they'll be back, we don't know. And of course, we know Lewis and Fernandes are out for quite a while. So a few problems for us. It's going to be a tough game, really tough game. But absolutely. I think if we can just try and cut out these stupid mistakes we keep making recently, I don't see why we can't give them a game, and hopefully we can come out of it with a point.
Absolutely. It's an interesting comment from Stu there. He's saying a lot of speculation that Howe feels he has to play the likes of Lascelles as he's a senior player in the dressing room, but Howe is going to have to be ruthless or his head will be on the block. It's an interesting one, that, Stu. I think we'll come on to that a little bit more in the transfer talk, possibly, because I really think that's going to be the key one in January for the likes of these senior players, if you call them Lascelles and Shelvey, who have made themselves a nice little niche at the club, and when January comes and you can upgrade on players, then obviously that's going to be something to look at in January. But I suppose just taking a little bit back to those games that you mentioned as well, James, there's a real growing feeling amongst the fan base. I did a piece for the Slide Rule Pass website, go check us out at SRP blog. It's on there now. Does the Premier League want Newcastle to go down? Now, it might sound totally X-Files, and I'm no Mulder, and I don't think either one of you two could pass for Scully, as handsome as you both are, mind you. But I think just to think about it, for a second, obviously this takeover was absolutely, dead against the agenda of the Premier League, and then all of a sudden it just whizzed through. Yes, the BN Sports thing was obviously it seemed to be the final locked door to open up, but is it beyond the realms of possibility, guys? Dan, coming to you first, mate. Is it beyond the realms of possibility that the Premier League may have an agenda to watch us go down?
I'm inclined to say that there probably isn't an agenda as such. I wouldn't go as far as saying that. I mean, as much as some of the decisions lately have been questionable, of course, Newcastle have written to the Premier League to inquire as to why some of these have gone against them, which is it's a fair point which gives people the sort of right to question this. But at the same time, I think it is. I just think, if anything, it's just showing the shocking standards of officiating in this country, because some of these decisions are happening to other teams as well, as far as I'm concerned. And I think it just shows just how poor officiating is in this country, like all the way through, top to bottom. And the people running it, you've got Mike Riley, who's the head of it all, and he was useless back in the day as well. So
I love how you say back in the day, Dan, like you were a wily old veteran.
Yeah. I'll get me walking stick. I can put my back if you want me to as well.
Yeah.
But
he's actually like Benjamin Button is Dan. He's actually 86. If anybody's watching along, he just uses loads of really good moisturizer, is what it is. So
I've had a lot of Botox. Like, a lot of it.
But even David Ellery, he's been in the papers recently, hasn't he? The controversy surrounding him and apparent racist comments going back to some members of staff. 7-8 years ago, whatever, and you do wonder really whether there's just should be a time for a complete overhaul of everything really to do with the PGMOL and what have you. But going back to what you were saying before, Chris, I think there's a fairly convincing argument to suggest that there is a case, and that's not just based on the last 3 games. Of course, there was the ridiculous Swan Lake-esque dive from Maddison in the Leicester game, which was unbelievable how that was given. I still can't get my head around that. The head injury that led up to Jota's goal in the Liverpool game, which should never have stood, in my opinion. The Trent goal, which another game was a clear obstruction by Mike Dean of Shelby, and of course the Stonewall penalty we should have had against Man City.
Well. There was the one in Fraser in the Liverpool game as well.
I forgot all about absolutely. That. That's how angry I was at the Man
Fraser
City.
Should have had 2.
Yeah, shocking.
Fraser should have had 2. But not only that, I mean, I can give you another couple of decisions that haven't gone against us this season. I remember Wilson, for me, should have had a penalty against Arsenal when he was through on goal and was clattered by Tavares, and we went on to lose that game 2-0. For me, that was a Stonewall penalty.
Yeah. It was it the second game of the season against Aston Villa as well?
Yeah, it was a red card on Emi Martinez, and he only got booked. And it was a complete farce. I mean, the guy nearly decapitated Callum Wilson, and he just got a yellow card. It was ridiculous.
It's absolutely shocking. I mean, PK's on the comments there again. Absolutely bang on, Paul. Refereeing in this country is an absolute shambles. I mean, me and Mark spoke about the Kane challenges and the Robertson challenges in the stat pack that we did. It's up on the Slide Rule Pass channel. If you want to check it out, guys, subscribe. But they were terrible. I mean, the Kane challenge is awful. I mean, Mark slowed it down in the still. His eyes are closed. His feet his studs are up. And if Robertson hadn't jumped off the ground, he would have snapped his leg in 2. And then Robertson obviously.
And then he said in the post-match interview, "I think I won the ball."
Yeah, I think I won the ball. Yeah. He says, "I think," because his eyes were shut. That's what he doesn't know. He won the ball. That's the problem. But yeah, there's no consistency at all with the referees. Yeah. It's absolutely
that's the problem. It's the consistency, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. So it's it's something that would definitely, I think, have to look at. And it was interesting just to leave this section. I was watching the Gallagher Shots lads the other day, and they pulled up a really interesting stat that we have the lowest VAR decisions given to us in the league. It's something like -6 out of all the games. Wow. And Wolves are just ahead of us with -3. If you compare that to someone like Spurs, then they've got 5 or 6. So that again adds fuel to that fire. And it'll be very interesting, off the back of this complaint that Newcastle write, whether the referees do anything at all, guys. But we'll certainly watch this space. And none of us would be surprised if there was a huge call in the Man United game that we don't get either, really, would we?
I can't think of any VAR decisions that have actually gone our way this season, to be honest with you. Off the top of my head, I can't think of one.
Penalty against Norwich, the handball, that went to VAR.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Maybe one then.
Yeah. the only controversial one I think we got really was that Sheffield United one, wasn't it? When Shelby scored, I think was the only one I can remember getting in recent time. I think last season when Shelby scored. Yeah, so it's it's bizarre. It definitely adds a lot of fuel to the fire. But moving on to the next section, Dan's going to have to shoot off in a minute here. So if he disappears, don't worry, we haven't cut him off. His broadband bill hasn't been unpaid or anything. He's got other commitments as Dan. So you'll be left with myself and James to carry through. But just to touch on this before Dan flies off, I'll come to you on this, Dan, quickly. Then you can fly the nest. Is Dubravka good enough? Now, before I get buried in the comments about this, Mark's been very adamant about this, talking about basic goalkeeping. He's talking about commanding his box. He's talking about, communicating to the back four. And yes, our defense is really poor, but more so the reason that the emphasis has to be on the goalkeeper to control that back four. If it is very poor, if the concentration levels aren't there, Dubravka's made a howler of a mistake to lead up to that goal. So Dan, just coming to you quickly, when I say is Dubravka good enough, I'm talking for the long haul. When we all do these fantasy teams where we sign all these great players, Dubravka always stays there. Is he safe enough now, mate, or should we look to upgrade?
If we're talking about sort of the future and the money we've got potentially to spend, then I think we can do better. I think for what we have now, he's probably quite good. And obviously, since he's been here, he's probably saved us more points than he's lost us, I'd say. But if we're looking to the future, I'd say we can do better in the goalkeeping department. But you are right. There's just so many of our players nowadays are just prone to absolute howlers, which is
serious errors as well, not little mistakes. Massive
goal giving away mistakes, which is a real problem, and he's been prone to them as well a little bit, which is a real shame. But I mean, obviously, he's a great shot stopper, but recently he hasn't commanded his box well enough, as we've mentioned, and as I say, it's led to costly errors, but. I think for now he's all right, but I think in the future we can do better. That's my opinion.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, you can love us and leave us on that comment, my friend. Good luck with your show on BBC. If you listen to the BBC, go check Dan out. But don't leave us. Stay with us as well, because we've got plenty more. Exactly.
See you soon.
We'll see you later, Dan.
Mate.
So James, just coming on to that comment for you then, mate. I know you're a huge fan of Dubravka. Is Dubravka good enough for you, mate?
I'm not actually a huge fan of Dubravka.
Sorry,
to be
mate.
fair. No, absolutely fine. I was a big Darlow
sorry, mate, I got the wrong way around. Yes, sorry, buddy.
No, don't worry about it. Easily done. Well, look, it's a tough one. This Dan made some good points before. He has been our best goalkeeper for a number of seasons now, and you would have to say he is the best keeper we have right now in the squad. And as I mentioned before, I was a big fan of Darlow last season, and especially near the end. I thought he was excellent, and he was even linked with England at one point, I remember. But I think Darlow has a really poor season this year in the games he has played. 8 games, I think he's played this season. But since Dubravka has come back into the team, have we really looked that much better? I mean, no, we probably haven't. But is it fair to blame Dubravka for our shocking defending lately? Probably not, on the flip side. But as you said, he has made a few howlers recently. The equaliser against Norwich, in my opinion, was his fault. Why he's palmed it back across the face of the goal is anybody's guess. I think he has to take blame for Man City's first goal on Sunday, as we discussed before, or part blame with Clark. But, to his credit, I thought against Liverpool, he did have a very good game. And overall, right now, he probably is our best keeper. But personally, I think we have probably got bigger priorities in January, and at a minimum, I want to see 2 centre halves, a fullback, defensive mid, and a striker sign. We'll come on to talk about that later. But look, we know how good Dubravka can be, and I'm sure with better players around him, his confidence will improve, and you'd like to think you'd see less of these mistakes. But realistically, if we are going to replace him, as he is about to turn 33, I think. We should probably just wait until the summer, I would say, for that.
Yeah, probably get a better quality keeper. You're right, and just going on to Darlow actually as well. Perhaps we're being a little bit harsh on Darlow because, Darlow had really bad COVID that everyone seems to forget, don't they? He could be really struggling with the long-lasting effects of that virus. Yes, he might say he's match fit and he comes in and he's maybe blowing a bit more than he should do. He can't quite reach to a shot. His reflexes aren't quite what they were. So perhaps maybe a bit time away from the starting lineup could give Darlow a bit more chance to build his body back up. But yeah, with Dubravka, it's a funny one because we know what he's capable of. I mean, Mark goes mad when you say shot stopper because that's like saying a postman can push a letter through a letterbox quite well. As far as Mark's concerned, shot stopping is goalkeeping 101. But if you look at that Jesus header, that's a world-class save that Dubravka pulls off in the game. after he's made that howler, and that's what he's capable of doing, isn't he? It's almost, he saves the unsavable, but then he can make such a meal out of the easy shot, like the Norwich one, as you rightly say. And it's so frustrating. But I think one of the biggest worries is behind him, as you rightly say, Darlow's had some real bad errors. Poor Freddie Woodman looked like a rabbit in the headlights when he came in. He didn't look ready at all. So really, outside of Dubravka, there probably isn't anybody. But I think you're right, mate. Come January, which we'll come on to next, I think on the Toon transfer talk. So
just going back to that, sorry, quickly, Chris. If you are going to talk about replacing him, you've got to get a keeper that's a massive improvement on him. And I don't think there's many out there right now that kind of fit the bill. I mean, obviously, look, money wise, isn't really going to be an issue, but possibly someone like Nick Pope at Burnley you could maybe look at. But there's not a wealth of brilliant goalkeepers out there that potentially we could go out and buy, unless potentially they are young and they have a point to prove. But again, you're taking a bit of a gamble there. But Nick Pope could be a really good signing, but we'll have to see on that one, wouldn't we?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's been talk about Henderson as well at Manchester United, hasn't there? About him, he went back there thinking he was going to be number one. Obviously, David De Gea has picked up form a lot more now. So, Henderson might be looking for game time as well. He's a good keeper, but he also has a bit of a rick in him as well, doesn't he, to be fair to him, So but he's a lot younger than Dubravka. So, it's a very interesting one. But that's a lovely segue to move us into Toon transfer talk, man, actually talking about who we're going to sign. But so just before we get into some of the players that have been linked, because again, another week goes by and there seems to be 150 players linked in Newcastle. But, one of the big things that was in the press recently, I believe we've had permission to talk to Dan Ashworth, former England advisor, and obviously at Brighton now as well, and very highly thought of in the game. Obviously, he kind of credited with England's change on and off the pitch, which has helped see them get to obviously semi-finals, finals. It's obviously helped get Gareth Southgate a lot of credibility as well, in his position. He's gone to Brighton, and obviously, coincidentally, Brighton have kind of upped the level as well, in terms of player recruitment, in terms of the dietitians and all this kind of stuff he puts behind the scenes. He seems to be a real impressive character, mate. So, firstly, what do you think about being linked to a guy of that magnitude? And secondly, would you be happy to see him come in?
Oh, I think it would be a massive statement signing. You need to talk about signing players. I mean, I think you've got to talk about someone as up high in terms of a director of football or whatever his role could potentially be. It would be huge. But yeah, I mean, just doing a bit of research on him earlier. I mean, he was responsible for bringing in the likes of Tariq Lamptey, Mark Cucurella, Neil Maupay, Adam Webster, Joel Veltman at Brighton. So absolutely. I mean, they've been fantastic players for Brighton, haven't they? And I certainly think he could do something.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely somebody who I think Newcastle United need. I mean, we saw with the kind of Unai Emery situation that, it's great that Amanda Staveley loves to chat, and she obviously likes to talk to the press and stuff like that. And it's brilliant. It's nice to have openness after, 14 years of pure silence from the ownership. But you've got to be careful what you say and how you say. And I think you have to have a football person at the top of the tree in the club to help, like you say, pull out these unbelievable signings out of nowhere, likes of Lamptey and guys like that. Nobody saw him coming through the Chelsea academy. Brighton obviously put him in, and now he's arguably one of the best right backs in the league, mate. So if Ashworth can bring that in, 100%, I'd be more than happy with that. So just moving on to players, Mark's made a good comment there. I did see some talk about Sam Johnson being linked. I know Mark's a big fan. I think he was on loan at Aston Villa from Manchester United, I believe, before he went to West Brom. Again, good shot stopper. Obviously got to the England squad, mate. Younger than Dubravka. Would you see him as an improvement, mate, or would he be a bit of an uninspiring choice for you?
Difficult one to say, isn't he? Because he's doing very well in the division where they are playing well. West Brom, they don't concede many goals. They are easily one of the best teams in that division, so he's not going to be as tested as much. But I think certainly when he was last in the Premier League, he made a big impact, didn't he? And he was talked about by several pundits as potentially being a future England number one. I would think someone like him would be a good signing. But personally, I'd go back to the guy before I mentioned, Nick Pope. I think he would be a massive statement signing. If you are looking at a goalkeeper, Nick Pope, or who you rightly mentioned, Dean Henderson, would be my top two choices.
Absolutely. No, I think there'd be some fantastic signings. So going on to the kind of priority areas, you mentioned it, James, and I know Paul mentioned it in the comments as well. The back four is shocking. I think Jamie Carragher just said they were disastrous, awful. I think he used every superlative he possibly could imagine without spitting on it on the camera. Sorry, Jamie, couldn't resist that one. But the back four is obviously a massive area of concern. The Kieran Trippier links get louder and louder every day. That seems to be a dead cert. Another player has been linked recently, which I know our good friend Di and a friend of the podcast will be really thrilled with, is Joe. Is it Joe Rodon from Spurs or Rodden? Beg your pardon, my Welsh pronunciation is terrible. Do you think he would be an improvement to the back four, mate, or is he just more similar to what we've got already?
Well, absolutely. Look, we have got the worst defence in the Premier League. I think we've conceded 41 goals in 18 games, and look, that simple fact that is relegation form. I mean, figure out the average of that. It's something like two and a bit goals per game we are conceding. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out we need defenders. And I mean, someone like Joe Rodon would be a good signing. I think minimum we need is two centre halves and a fullback. I'd love to see the likes of Tarkowski or Cody come in. Two proven Premier League players. They're leaders. They've got England caps between them. Probably just about in the peak of their careers right now. I think they're both around 28, something like that. They would improve that team dramatically. You mentioned Kieran Trippier before. I'd love to see him come in at fullback. Yes, he's predominantly a right back, but he can play left back also, so can have cover there if needed be. Southgate played him at left back a couple of times in the Euros, I believe, and he's a world-class player. And we've never had a world-class defender since arguably Jonathan Woodgate, maybe Colaccini. I don't know, depends on how you look at it, but he probably wants one more challenge. I think he's 31. He's not getting any younger, but he will still want to prove he can do it in the Premier League. And I think those three would probably be the most realistic signings we could make. Then you've got the likes of Nathan Ake at Man City, who's been mentioned, could be another one. Doesn't get much game time there, does he? I think he could come in and do a really good job. And then you've got the likes of Luca Dean at Everton. Possibly might be a bit of a stretch, but a brilliant fullback. And the way Everton are going now, he might want to get out. But you never know. Throw enough money at something, and anything's possible. We all know money talks, don't we?
Well, absolutely, mate. And I think the back four, again, there's no room for sentiment. Dan had touched on it a little bit earlier about, these guys did well to get us up and everything else. You can't be like that now, especially with the position that we're in, with the resources we have. You've got to just be cold and ruthless and say, upgrade. And that's certainly what we have to do. It's interesting because a little bit further up the pitch, I mean, there was a story that I'd love it to be true, but I don't know if it's bullshit or not. But there was a story about apparently we're in for Calvin Phillips from Leeds, who I'd be stunned if we get him, even with the resources we get. He would be phenomenal.
He'd be outstanding.
He's everything we need in that position, 100%. But, there'd be a queue of clubs for him in Champions League football clubs, really, really big clubs. So that one I'll take with a pinch of salt. But there's a couple of other names that got thrown out there, which I know we mentioned in the crack group chat that we have with a lot of our fellow writers and podcasters. And one name that got thrown out there was Philip Coutinho. And it was a little bit of a controversial one because some guys saying, I don't want him anywhere near the club. I suppose there's that worry of that mercenary tag and everything else. But for me, Philip Coutinho is 100 times better than anybody we've got in that squad. And I'm including St. Maximin in that as well. Philip Coutinho is a player that can unlock a defence on his own. He's brilliant on the ball. He's a leader as well. He can take the game by the scruff of the neck. He did it at Liverpool so many times. Yes, he's went to Barcelona and it hasn't worked, but that's happened to so many players. I mean, even Zlatan went to Barcelona, it didn't work out for him, and he's one of the most frequent goal scorers of all time. Coutinho for you, mate, would that excite you? Would you be interested? Would that be a statement signing?
Yeah, I'd be massively excited by Coutinho. I think he's a fantastic player, and especially if we are going to bring in more players with better signings around him. I mean, he can play as a number 10. He can play as a creative playmaker, second striker, central midfielder. There's a lot of positions he can cover. I mean, at one point, he was one of the best players in the world, wasn't he? Like 3 or 4 years ago, you go back to when he was at Liverpool, he was compared to the likes of Kevin De Bruyne and what have you. Yeah, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. He struggled in recent seasons, and whether or not he is still the same player as he was is a bit of a risk, but you've got to take risks when you're in the predicament we are in. And he could be the kind of signing that gets the ball rolling, that would allow other players to follow suit. And he's the kind of player you look at and you think, if you're a player, do you know what? I want to be a part of that. They're signing Coutinho. I like the sounds of that. And in terms of a marquee signing, he would be the one, wouldn't he? And I think either him or possibly the likes of Dusan Vlahovic or Alexander Isak as well, perhaps, who we've also been linked with. But yeah, one of those three. It would take a lot of money to get one of them. But yeah, that would be brilliant. Look, plenty to look forward to, and I'm counting down the days. Only 10 days to go until the window opens, and it's going to be brilliant, isn't it? Every day is going to be first thing in the morning. You're going on social media, you're going on Sky Sports to see who potentially we're bringing in, and it's going to be great. But Coutinho, mate, yeah, going back to that, I think he'd be brilliant.
It would be. I mean, there's a lot of stories about Barcelona obviously being skint. That's quite well known. They're in real financial difficulties. I think weirdly enough, they just agreed a deal for Torres from Man City. So that's something to keep an eye on, because I think Man City will be signing a striker. So, there'll be a bit of movement in the transfer market there. But yeah, I mean, there's talk about 200 grand a week. That'd be pocket change to our owners. Coutinho would be a massive statement signing. And another guy who was mentioned that my dad would be a huge fan of, because he's a Celtic fan, is Musa Danbelli. At Lyon, and he went on loan to Atletico Madrid. I think he caught COVID, and I think he had a bit of a rough time. But I mean, Musa Danbelli is a proper goal scorer as well, a proper striker. And somebody like that, I think, to play alongside Wilson, to put competition with Wilson as well. Because Wilson's injury record is bad, as we all know. Having a proper second centre forward there, where you could go two up front with two actual goal scorers. I mean, we had it in Shearer and Ferdinand, if you remember. They're too similar, they can't play together. And we all know how that kind of worked out as well. But how do you feel about a striker like that to challenge Wilson? Do you think that's a priority area as well, mate?
I wouldn't say it's a number one priority, considering, as I mentioned before, the defence has to simply be the priority. But, you've got to look at competition for Wilson. Dwight Gale, for whatever reason, is just not getting a look in, which I find baffling, to be honest with you, considering the new contract he signed and what have you. But it looks as though Howe's just never going to play him. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. Dembele, I like the look of him. Yeah, he could be a good player. Had a few issues, as you mentioned, with COVID and what have you. But someone like Isak, who I mentioned before, would be outstanding.
Pure
I mean,
pace as well. He's so brilliant. Fast, isn't he? Yeah,
he's one of the best young players in the world right now, and to be honest with you, he's a better player than Callum Wilson. So it would be probably Callum Wilson would be on the bench if we're signing someone like Isak. And I hate to say that because I love Wilson, as you know. Wilson is my favourite player. He's absolutely brilliant. But yeah, Vlahovic as well. He keeps getting mentioned, doesn't he? Like a massive bid. Apparently, we're looking at putting in for him. And some of the top four are looking at him at Chelsea. I think we're talking about going in for him as well, because it looks as though Lukaku potentially is not really working out there, which I find an odd one as well. But yeah, certainly if the money's there, which it will be, we know, and we have got the defence sorted out and potentially a midfielder, then yeah, let's absolutely get in a centre forward as well. But if we don't sign a centre forward in January, not the end of the world. We'll definitely get one in the summer. I'm convinced.
Absolutely, mate. And yeah, I suppose it's as you rightly say, and if you look at the backroom staff, if you get the right guy in and make the right decisions, have a chat with Howe and say, right, these are the priority areas, these are the players we've identified, they want to come, this is the amount we're going to pay, this is the wages. Yes, they want relegation clauses. People shouldn't get hung up on relegation clauses. If you're a player now and you're looking at this Newcastle United project and they're only 3 points, that's the important bit. If you're only 3 points away from getting out of it, one or two games, then you can absolutely do that. You can absolutely achieve that. And if you're a player like those, or even like a James Ward-Prowse, who'd be a great player for us as well. He's looking at Southampton. They're only a little bit above us in the league, and he's looking at that project. And as you rightly say, James, if a statement signing comes in like Isak or Coutinho, he might go, Christ, I fancy some of that. And he might say to his agent, get me a move to Newcastle. And these players will back themselves to get us out of it. But I suppose that leads me on to my next question for you, and just to finish up this week's podcast. We said the same thing last week. Obviously, we've been beaten by the two best teams in the league this week, and we've obviously got one of the other top six sides coming on the 27th. How are you feeling about staying up, mate? Are you positive, or are you thinking we're going to go down? Where do you sit on it?
I mean, I change my opinion every day, to be honest with you, Chris, on this. And after the Man City game, I was very disheartened, and I wasn't really feeling positive. But look, the more the days go on, and the more you're getting linked with the likes of the players that we've mentioned before, you can see that light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that Everton game after Man U is a really, really massive. That potentially, if we win that, I think we stay up. And you know, again, I'm sick of saying this. It's a huge game. It's a huge game because they all are at the moment. But if we can get a point off Man U and we can beat Everton, I think that'll just set us up really nicely for that January window. And I'm convinced we're going to do some really good business. So, yeah, look, I'm going to say we're going to stay up, mate. Just
fantastic. Well, I'm very much like you, mate. I have good days and bad days with it, but you keep looking at the table, you know, and Mark and I said it when we were doing the stat pack on Monday night, that, you know, the other teams keep falling over themselves, you know, for whatever reason, call it fate or fortune. For Newcastle, nobody's pulling clear of the relegation zone. You know, Leeds had a couple of pepperings as well. Southampton are very streaky. You know, they're slipping down. Even Brighton are stopped winning games. You know, Watford are hitty-missy. So if we can stay
Burnley and Norwich can't win for love nor money.
Yeah.
I mean, they're certainly down in my opinion.
I mean, but Burnley have got those 3 games in hand, which could be, you know, money in the bank for them, couldn't they, really? You know, but I think as long as we can stay in the mix, and as you rightly say, we've got to look to get something out of Manchester United. Listen, we've beat them at St James's before. Why can't we do it again? You know, go at them, play the way we can, play on the front foot. It worries me about the back line. I think that's the real issue for us. And if Manchester United get their chances, Fernandes, Ronaldo, you know, we could be done again. But you've got to get to January in a good chance to get out of it. And if you are, you know, then absolutely fantastic. You know, we'll get them players in. And I agree with you. Players will come because they'll see the project. 1 or 2 wins in the Premier League can be achieved. And if you get 1 or 2 wins with a new back 4, you know, you could be out of it. Stu's just jumped in the comments there. So you say, if a club's looking to cash in the big assets, surely a loan and obligation to buy an agreed fee if we stay up is a good enough deal. I agree with that, Stu. I think there is going to be players that people who want off their wage bills. We're mentioning about Coutinho as well. I mean, Jesse Lingard was an interesting one because he was linked quite heavily, wasn't he, James? And then it looks like he's going to stay at Manchester United and leave on a free transfer. So he's after a huge payout, isn't he, really? He could still come in the summer if we stay up, mate.
Yeah. Martial, another one mentioned as well. I mean, look, we are in that position because we're the richest club in the world that we are going to get linked with every single player, and we have to just accept that. But it's how we do the business and the right moves. And as you mentioned before, Dan Ashworth, if we can get someone like him in, then that just sets us up really nicely for that window, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And I think it's something that everybody in the football world is going to be keeping an eye on, not just Newcastle fans. But that's us, mate. We're all wrapped up for this week's episode of Evermore. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining the comments. Great to talk to you. You know, we'll be back after Christmas with another one. James, thanks for coming on, mate. Great debut as always, mate. I would never expect anything less from you, pal.
Thank you very much, Chris. Really enjoyed it, mate.
No problem at all. And listen, guys, have a fantastic Christmas, whatever you're doing. You know, drink, enjoy your time with your family. We're allowed to, thank God. So enjoy it and have a great time. And let's hope for 3 points against Manchester United. Okay, guys, see you later now.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.